Oh, sorry. One thing I just wanted to confirm before we started also was that I'm saying your name Greg Saunier. Is this correct?
Here we go again. You guys can say it two different ways.
Saunier.
Mais oui, monsieur.
Oui,
Yeah.
oui, oui. Critical Listening, Episode 1.
Hello, everybody. I am Liz Pelly.
Hello, everyone. My name is Max Alper. Okay, Liz, what do we have in store for today's episode?
With us today as our first guest is Greg Saunier of Deerhoof. And I gotta say, I am really glad that Greg is not sick of doing interviews with me yet. I counted, and this is actually my 5th time interviewing him.
Wow. Yeah, the vibes are amazing. It's like I'm just kind of tagging along with two old friends who are catching up, you know? I'm just like, la, 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 hi, guys.
So for those who don't know, I feel like Deerhoof barely needs an introduction, but for anyone who doesn't know, Deerhoof formed in 1994. They've released records on Kill Rock Stars, Polyvinyl, and in more recent years on Joyful Noise. They just released a new record last month titled Noble and Godlike in Ruin, out on Joyful Noise. And Greg also released a solo record last year called We Sang, Therefore We Were. He also frequently performs as a solo percussionist and collaborative improviser, recently worked with the Kronos Quartet, and has an upcoming show of duo and trio improvisational performances with Maria Chavez and Shahzad Ismaili on May 21st at Union Pool in Brooklyn.
That is a serious night. Definitely for the heads, as they say. So highly recommended. And this episode will be out before that show. So New York people, definitely go check that out. Before we start the interview, just want to thank all of you for tuning in to our episode 0, our introductory episode earlier this month, or I guess end of last month. We have a lot of ideas in the pipeline for this show, and we can't wait to produce them all for you. But obviously, we can't do it alone. So please sign up for our Patreon at patreon.com/critical listening, where you will get bonus materials and extended cuts of various episodes, including this one, as well as access to our slowly growing and thriving Discord community.
Thanks again, all. And now let's get to the interview with Greg Saunier.
All right, let's go.
So to launch our conversation, we definitely want to ask about the new Deerhoof record, Noble and Godlike in Ruin. But before that, I was hoping that we could quickly just go back in time for a second. We talk a lot about how hostile the current landscape of extractive industry practices are to art making, which is, of course, all a microcosmic example of general tech feudalist, billionaire class, end times fascist hostility to human life and dignity. But despite these conditions that are so utterly antagonistic to art making, here is Deerhoof releasing its 20th album, having survived the past 2 decades of industry bullshit. When I think about the perseverance of lifer artists in these hellish times, I think a lot of this one Deerhoof song from 2017 called I Will Spite Survive. And specifically this lyric where you sing, you could outlive your executioners. it was kind of this rallying cry, like maybe staying alive is actually the most radical thing that we could do. But it also feels sort of like an articulation of what Deerhoof has done, outliving the industry forces that squash radical art making. So for the first question, I was just hoping to ask, like, how has Deerhoof survived? And not just survived, but seemingly also with your idealism intact.
There's an irony in the line that that I think detracts from its power, and I think that you are appreciating it in a very pure and beautiful way. The irony being that it was an attack against a political class and a corporate class that was older than us. And so these executioners, we will literally outlive them because they're just going to die soon. And it was around the time of the Clinton-Trump battle. And both of them, kind of competing for who is more out of touch. And turned out that Clinton was more out of touch and even more unpopular than Trump. Both of them exceedingly unpopular, but her winning the crown, of the least popular. And so it's like at this point, I think it would be fair for bands younger than Deerhoof, of which there are a great many, and like you just, let the cat out of the bag at the beginning that we are very old, and and long running. That it may be time for a younger artist to actually outlive us and maybe even execute us at this point. Feel like
kill your idols, right? It's very No Wave.
Yeah,
kill your idols.
But as far as like survival, I think also there's a double-edged quality. I don't necessarily chalk Deerhoof's survival or my personal human survival in till 2025 up to either skill or a spite. I also chalk it up to dumb luck and to privilege. And me being a white cis able-bodied male, straight, it's like that there are people of my generation who had bands when they were also in their 20s, formed bands in their 20s that just weren't able to keep it going because that hostility that you described targeted them first or more strongly than they targeted me. So and a lot of it's dumb luck. I mean, the spite element is there, and I would love anyone who listens to that song, if they happen to feel some kind of empowerment, obviously, and take some vitamins from that and feel like built up and like, okay, but I mean, if I'm fair, it's not really accurate to describe my band as some kind of like um, a greater skill for survival. We got very lucky with our very first booking agent. We got so lucky. We got signed after our first out of town show to Kill Rock Stars. Like, I mean, just the number of things that lined up, just stars aligning completely in our favor. And I mean, just the simple fact that over the 31 years that Deerhoof has been a band, you mentioned 20 years of industry. It's hard for me to say it in public, but because I don't usually curse, but I like the word industry bullshit. And I wondered which 20 years you were talking about, because for me, it's been 31 years, definitely. But I suppose the most recent 20 have been the ones that were the most hostile. Just we were so lucky that we started when we did. And that if Deerhoof were exactly the same, with the same songs, with the same lineup, with the same chord progression, with the same drum beat, with the same Instagram page, whatever, and tried to start now, I know we would get nowhere. We would be nothing. It's like it's impossible to be a young musician right now. And we, while the feeling of spite is of course very much present in our music, I have to admit there's also a feeling of both gratitude and and sorrow. You know, we squeaked by.
Do you ever feel like it's the sense of gratitude that keeps you going, though? Because I imagine there must be something that keeps you going, though, you know?
It's a very beautiful question. It's a very good question, but I I struggle to see it that way. I think that it's more like I see myself as someone who, at a very early age, realized that oneself likes making things and likes making music. And I do not consider myself even remotely unique in that way. That's like basically the human experience right there when you're a kid, you know? Almost every kid loves to sing or dance or draw or, you know, whatever. And so for me, what I see is that I just have been lucky enough to not have had um, enough obstacles put in my way. I would just keep going naturally. And I think any human like is naturally, there's nothing about the human brain at age 90 that derives less pleasure than at age 20 in seeing, watching themselves make something. You see what I'm saying? Just the creative act itself is pleasurable. And I think that it's becomes socialized out of people, and like all these roadblocks are put in the way that make it seem like, you know, you have to do it within capitalism, and then you fail at that, and then you're like, oh well, then I'll do it as a hobby. But then you're so run down from your jobs that feels like a luxury, you know, to make things feels like when it's a basic human need. You know, sometimes people will say to me like, "Man, you know, you seem productive. You seem to be prolific. You're chugging out a lot of junk, you know, like a lot of stuff coming out here, you know." And I'm like, you know, they're like, "Is it your Protestant work ethic?" And I'm like, no, no, it's a coping mechanism. Can you not see it? Like, come on, could you, like, for 1 second, listen to the record and realize this is us losing our minds, deranged, trying to wrap our head around the planet we live on and the species that we're a part of. And it's a coping mechanism. And some people, you know, it's like fight or flight or freeze. You know, it's like, uh, I think that Deerhoof, for whatever reason, just under stress makes things, you know, and it's our way of coping.
That's a that's a really interesting point you had just made, because you had just posted on Instagram specifically on the track with Saul Williams on the new record Under Rats,
Yeah.
where you know, write out, you know, questioning what is even the point of making art in our day and age right now, you know, with an ongoing genocide having become like a new normal and just like blasted on your screen if you're, you know, ever, you can't avoid it, as well as just the newer changes that you know are newer for Deerhoof in its 30-year trajectory of just having all main channels of being able to distribute your art now are completely overrun by oligarchs that have no interest in the humanities, arts, culture, period. And, you know, you wrote that you took a lot of inspiration from Saul Williams's approach to art making, by, you know, an approach to dealing with this grief and frustration through your creative practices and connecting that to a social practice. And you wrote specifically the quote, which I really enjoyed. We express ourselves in order to find our chosen family. So that being said, you know, and that being obviously the political and social sort of backdrop to the production of this record, and there are certainly many confrontational and more brooding and darker sounds on the record, including this track, Under Rats. There's also the complete polar opposite on this. Like the record starts, the first track, what is it? Overrated Species Anyhow is just like an explosion of joy, just like major keys and just big, like big dynamics and like, earworm melody. So, there's this contrast, right? So how intertwined was the grief portion of this creation compared to the joy? Like, are there moments of consciously embodying one versus the other?
With music, one of the things that I feel like one can do is it's not just choose grief or joy. And it's not even do both. Do some grief and then do some joy. To me, it's not just an alternation, let's say, between, dark and light or, happy, sad, or whatever. But it's kind of like the emotions are like piled onto each other simultaneously, It's like the first track sounded happy to you, which makes me happy. But it also makes me sad to know that you think it was happy because I wanted it to sound sad. But I also wanted it to sound sort of happy. You see what I'm saying? And everything's it's like a potion, of different. It's a complex emotion, let's say.
Triumph. That was another word I was really thinking of. For some
I know, but
reason,
it's ironic triumph. It's basically saying, love to all my, various aliens or savages or animals, basically dehumanized others, and since dehumanization is becoming a very popular trick in the past few years as a way to justify profiteering on the parts of, whether it's weapons manufacturers or, prisons or, the Pentagon or, antidepressants or just, anything that is profiting off of people's misery or destruction. They're profiting off of dehumanization. The triumph is ironic. It's like you've been somewhat destroyed, somewhat compromised, but you're still hanging on and you want to end together if you can.
I felt like I was sensing like cross-species solidarity on this record as well.
I just spilled the beans. Deerhoof is always about cross-species solidarity. We did call the band Deerhoof after all.
That's true. Something about Deerhoof seems to always remind me of ants crawling all over my body for some reason.
All right, here's the thing about ants. You guys know this? This is the perfect example of what I'm talking about. I mean, perfect. This encapsulates, we can actually end the podcast right after this. For over 100 years, scientists have observed large groups of ants stage mock battles with each other. This is true. This proves that even ants who are, I also just learned 2 days ago, ants are older than the rings of Saturn. Even going back that far into Earth history, fun, play, make-believe are deeply ingrained in the earthly experience. And that if ants are doing this and ants are having fun, and then now somebody going to come up on TV or whatever and tell me that making things and playing are a luxury and it's goofing off and I'm goofing off for a living, I gotta differ with you. It's like, I think it's kind of like basic stuff. And the idea of a mock battle in particular is this playing at violence, and and I think that Deerhoof's music from day one has always been violence has been a big part of our music. And, it could be the reckless abandonment of feeling joy, or it could be the reckless abandonment of feeling great anger. It could also be just reckless abandonment for its own sake and with no particular or no clear emotion attached. Just wailing and screaming, in an undefined way, uncategorizable, and I don't know. It's like a way of processing, being confronted with the existence of violence.
Yeah, I know. So it's one of my first podcast interviews. I couldn't help it. I did what music critics do. I printed out the lyrics and I was circling things.
Wait! I got something to tell you. No other
Yeah.
music critic actually does that.
No, some of them do. But I was circling things and I was, it's like, oh yeah, bombs, guns, blood, oil. This makes sense that it, is an album of, joy and hope and solidarity across species, but it also felt like there's a lot of like refusal, rejection, violent imagery. And I wanted to ask about the song Disobedience that the title comes from there, and I couldn't tell exactly, but it seemed to kind of maybe be a song about class war. Did I just like make that up? Yeah. Okay.
No, that's what I thought it was. I haven't asked my bandmates what they think it is. So I can only speak on behalf of the percussion section of the band, but I did write the lyrics on that one, and I imagined a sort of the planet or the species as a kind of military ship, and that attempting to stage a mutiny, and that while the captain has more means of violence, has more power, he is outnumbered, and so that's your hope. But it's sort of like at the same time, it's not like the song ends with the triumph. It's not like a whole novel. It's just more like a situation that I feel like it's just kind of a metaphorical situation that represents like how I often feel. Like, and I think a lot of people feel this, I'm ready. I'm ready to go. I'm ready for this mutiny. I'm ready to disobey. Like, sign me up. Where do I sign? Like, let's go, and then they're not really sure what first step to take, and like attempts at organization have been so systematically beat down and so infiltrated, or so like deliberately confused, or the discourse gets extracted with some infighting or some kind of weird controversy over something that was not the real urgent emergency, whatever it was. That mutiny keeps not happening, and there's a kind of, at some point you feel very fatigued from the sort of like whatever chemicals, maybe bodily chemicals, are flooding your system every single day, making you ready to fight, and then you don't. And then the next day it's like, okay, and then you don't, and you can't find a way. You can't find a place to put this energy in.
I wanted to also ask you about the end of that song. Well, okay, so that song, Disobedience, ends with this, extreme, explosive ending. And it's almost like this radio broadcast or something. But it sounds maybe like, I can't quite hear what the words are, but it sounds like it's alluding towards the Stop Cop City movement. Did I hear that? Is that in there?
Yeah, you heard it right. You're paying close attention there, Liz. Okay.
It's not on the lyric sheet, so.
It is, however, in the, if you order the VIP LP edition, It comes with a zine that has the complete text of, and it was just something that I wrote. It was called "Will There Be a McDonald's at Cop City?" And it was my zine. And so Satoshi read kind of just maybe the first two paragraphs of it, but it's like a whole big, long, kind of, I don't know, not an essay, more like a play. And yeah, it's just kind of because Cop City is, it's certainly one facet of you know, it's one of the things that helps us understand what the ruling class's strategy for collapse is. It's not to slow the collapse. It's not to stop the collapse. It's not to save anybody other than themselves from the collapse. It's to say, yes, it's definitely collapse. And we're simply going to defend ourselves. We're going to hire mercenaries to shoot the rest of you so that we can stay safe. That's all it is, And when you see the emergence of Cop City as a phenomenon, I mean, there's only so far you can go to try and make it sound plausible that this is somehow in response to like shoplifting candy bars or something, from the corner store. Like, no, Cop City is like, we're talking the total militarization of our country's police, basically ready to fight war against the entire population.
Mhm.
But again, it goes back to the mood machine sort of premise that there is some part of the population that is at the other end of the gun, that the gun's being pointed at, that is like looking forward to having that McDonald's. You see what I'm saying? It's like it's presented as something desirable that they're going to actually ask for and demand. Yes, please have this Cop City. That's the trick of it. It's not Hitler coming here and saying, I don't care what the rest of you think, I'm taking over and you're finished. And I am going to lead the country to ruin, whether you like it or not. And I'm happy for Germany to be utterly destroyed if you guys fail to follow my orders. This is different. This is, this is the refined version of fascism, which has been in development ever since the end of World War II, which is I'm going to trick you into thinking that fascism is what you want.
Mhm.
It's a whole different thing.
Or like, manufacturing and manipulating people into the fear and then profiting off of selling them the solution to it, which is,
exactly.
these bunkers, prepper culture, cop cities,
as well
controlling
as
the border, like.
Yeah, but also selling them the solution, which is anesthetizing, opiating services such as Spotify that will help you chill out during what you know is an emergency, a life emergency, life threatening.
Well, now it seems just like purely nihilistic, like the slop culture is just like with the shit coins, in crypto being just like, it's a casino, get in, get out. This is a fucking scam. Like, and the same thing, like I notice it with Spotify people, this resignation of just it's what can you do about it? Like, I know it's bad, and I mean, like, I don't see it as much as far as the AI music, thankfully, as far as consumers being like, hell yeah, I love Suno. But look at the AI, look at the Ghibli stuff with OpenAI, where it's just like, clearly this is a bastardization of your childhood. But you're like, fuck it, man. I want to see what I look like a Miyazaki character, and I'll boil the ocean to do it. It feels very nihilistic in many ways. And I mean, I don't know. Can you blame a kid now who's only known this at this point? Like, it's not something that happens overnight. It's a very gradual shift towards what was once being promised as, empowering is now just nihilistic. Get yours because it's all going to end.
I don't think it applies only to kids who've been brought up with the internet or with digital media or digital, with phones and etc. I talk to my parents a lot, and it's often can be an awkward and strained conversation in which, they joined the Peace Corps in the mid 60s, inspired by John F. Kennedy's rallying cry for liberalism was going to bring progress and democracy to the world, and history was on an upward trajectory. And then to believe that and devote your life to that for subsequent decades, it is very, very, very hard adjustment to. I can see the temptation to want to say, oh, that one guy in the White House right now is just one random bad apple.
Right.
It's the system that we wanted was perfect and was going to bring us paradise, And it's really, really hard to face up to that, it actually was. It's not that my parents were flawed, but it was what they were indoctrinated to believe in was not only flawed, but actually intended to become this. This was the intended outcome and the known outcome. The idea of progress, actual democracy or progress, was given up on by those with real power long before 2025. I mean, I tend to. Everybody, has their sort of like moment when something switched, but I tend to think because it happened during my lifetime, during my childhood, the emergence of Reagan and Thatcher was kind of a big turning point
For sure.
in world history. The advent of neoliberalism and that really that's what you just described. That nihilism that you're describing was deliberately anything but nihilism as a political or economic model was officially abandoned at the point Reagan and Thatcher took control. That was what one neoliberalism is. We're no longer going to factor anything in except GDP and how the stock market is doing. And
Right.
any other thing that you might have wanted to consider a human value, we're going to privatize it. We're going to defund it till it fails. Then we're going to privatize it.
I wanted to talk about some Deerhoof lore.
Oh, on second thought.
In 2008, Deerhoof released a single, Freshborn, first as sheet music.
That's right.
Prompting fans to record their own versions and then upload them to a public website, all before the song was actually, the recording was released.
The Deerhoof recording, yeah, exactly.
The Deerhoof recording.
Right on.
And the sheet music was posted under a Creative Commons license. And then the website that you guys made was using the open source Cache Music tool. I feel like there's a couple of things about that are super interesting. One, I think just the idea of an experimental rock band releasing sheet music kind of speaks to the spirit of Deerhoof in some way, right? Like merging virtuosity and playfulness, seriousness and accessibility. But I also feel like the story offers sort of like a glimpse into a type of internet that we almost had, or maybe like once had, like a more creative, experimental use of technology, or even just of websites. And using technology to really challenge deeply ingrained ideas that we have about what a recorded music project even is, you know? So I was wondering if at the time when you were doing that project, if it felt like, I don't know, subversive in any way, or did it just seem fun, or was it both? I mean, obviously it could be both, you know? And do you think that something like that is something you'd ever want to try again? Or do you feel like the possibility around what we could do with open source tools has kind of like faded as the internet has just become like more enclosed and extractive and
The
you know
idea that we were playing with there, the upload idea, I think was sort of like a later addition. the And of course it made sense. We had to have some place to put the result, but it was not what it was meant to subvert was not anything regarding the music industry. We were hoping to subvert the idea that that it's sort of like, okay, that there are the kind of songs that one writes that are very easy to cover, and the original artist may be famous for their recorded rendition of it, but there's something so folky and simple about the song that it feels kind of like infinitely coverable. Then you have, like, at the same time period, you know, someone like Sid Barrett or something like that, or I don't know, Tiny Tim, or you know, some kind of like someone with such an eccentric presentation of their music that it's like maybe if you really thought about it, it wouldn't be hard to cover, you know, some of those early Pink Floyd songs or the Sid Barrett solo record or whatever. But your first hit off of it is like, whoa, you know, these guys are weird. Um, like, what an original, what a individual, inimitable voice. And I think what we were trying to subvert was the idea that Deerhoof was one of those eccentric, experimental, totally far out, like, you know, could never be covered. I think we wanted to, because we felt like our music was folk music and really easy and really simple. And maybe our versions get sort of overloaded. Our live versions sometimes get overloaded with a bunch of weird, like, you know, rococo detail and bizarre curly cues and like mistakes and screw ups and you know, eccentricity in the delivery. But we actually thought, like, you know, our songs are actually, they're kind of just regular songs, you know, with a melody and a beat, you know, chord progression. And so we wanted to kind of like, yeah, subvert that idea and paint ourselves as like trying to do like timeless songwriting, you know. I think that was just, and no, I don't think it's totally gone away. I think that before 2008 and since 2008, I think that's always like a little part of our thinking. And of course, you know, some songs succeed more than others in that regard. Some of them really are. I mean, we're finding it out now because we're trying to learn how to play a bunch of songs for our new set list because we're about to go on tour. It's like, dude, these songs are so hard. Like, what were we thinking, you know? But like, but at least there's a side, you know, to our band, and probably a lot of bands. There's a side to our band that's like, no, we just wanted to make a simple song that anybody could play, you know. So that was the idea of the sheet music, was just like anybody can play. It doesn't have to be our weird version with our weird drummer and our weird singer and our weird guitar players. It's like anybody can play this song. It's just a song, you know.
Well, it really struck me because I think that, you know, the idea that to release your sheet music to your song before people who like your band have even heard the recording, have them record their own versions of it, and then the music is released with a Creative Commons license, and then you have this open source website where everyone can upload their own versions. Like, it really challenges the idea of what a record is, or the idea of a recorded music project in the popular imagination. But even now, it's like so interesting thinking about it under the cloud of the current era of generative AI companies, because even now, like, there's this idea of like, oh, well, if all your stuff is on the internet for free, is it going to be sucked up and like used as training data in these systems? And even now, like, they came under heat, a couple of years ago because Creative Commons themselves have argued that generative AI systems like sucking in artists' work qualifies as fair use. So it's like, what does that mean? It kind of confuses this like kind of idea, and it's like
one of those issues that splits the left. Exactly.
Totally.
The copy left, being so militantly, and now you see it.
Exactly.
That's what they shake. They agree with Jack Dorsey and Elon Musk of like destroy all IP, right?
Exactly.
And it's like there has to be the Creative Commons, the framework of that, maybe didn't foresee generative AI scraping every bit of data off of the internet.
I know, but what's your excuse when now you can foresee it because it's happening and it's real, and you still take that? I mean, that I think it's obvious.
A lot of the famous copy left are all tenured professors. They're fine. They'll be good.
Right. It's just an abstraction for them. Yeah. Yeah. Totally.
Even in music.
By being eclectic in our music, if somebody says, "Well, just make a classic Deerhoof song," or make something in the most stereotyped Deerhoof sound, you'd be a little hard pressed to know quite what that is. We've never had a hit. And it's like, well, I don't know which song is really the one. It's probably just whichever one you heard first. You know what I'm saying? That is not a solution. It's not a legal solution. It's not a path forward legally or in terms of policy, either from the government or from a entity such as Creative Commons. But it's just our little way to weasel out of this problem is just try to make music that you can't imitate. Better or worse. I mean, you can't. It's a little hard to take it to the top, when you're making music you can't imitate, because part of the reason that something makes it to the top 40 is because that it's a something about it is stereotyped, and can be reproduced, and you can make more hits like it's a template. And we've just always tried to shun the template and it's not that we knew AI was coming, but it's just, I don't know, it's like a protective strategy. Just try to be agile, always changing your tone, change your attitude, change your facial expression, change your style, change your fashion, just to where the machine can't keep up with you, and can't figure out what you're about,
It's like anti-surveillance, exactly. And I feel like it really drives home how the current era of AI we're experiencing is sort of just like repackaging of surveillance technology.
You got it.
Cat and mouse game now. I mean, it used to be, I used to think that you could be a punk band, sound like your favorite band, that's totally okay. That I used to be like, that's enough. But honestly, now I tend to not think that, because it's just, you're going to be swooped up in it. And, falling into the template is, you're now going to be in competition with some startup that's just, generate punk song.
Or you're going to become the material that the startup, or worse yet than a startup, it's an end up. Some giant corporation has used your sound to sell whatever it is, the toothpaste or whatever it is that they're hawking, and you can't do anything about it because you yourself had already bought into a level of copying, by adopting, like volunteering for that army, whatever it is, if the punk army or any musical style, that you kind of it has a in the end it might have a kind of result that you don't like, which is that it's very easy to turn you into I mean, God, somebody was telling me yesterday that just we're on a plane and like they're getting off the plane. And like as they're, deplaning, it's Beach House playing through the speakers. And I'm like, man, that's harsh, It's like Beach House was the hippest of the hip. And for all I know, may still be. Um, and just sweetest people and like so cool. The music's so cool, but it's like it's not like, I mean, I shouldn't be even saying this on the podcast, but it's just like it's like there's like, and they probably got a good payout for that, but there's one. It's not even that I judge them. It's just that Deerhoof's strategy has, for better or worse, been to try to not make music that could end up in the deplaning background music. You see what I'm saying? Because it just wouldn't work, And I'm really not defending it because it's also a tiring way to think. It becomes like a sickness where you're always running away from that surveillance camera. You're always running away from that data mining sweep, and you're basically just feel like you're always on the run. And there is an element of that in Deerhoof where there's this settled quality to it that kind of takes its toll, I think, psychologically. I'm not complaining. I mean, I'm very happy for the life I have, but it's like, yeah, it feels like we can't relax. We can't really like settle into a. Of course, if we ever did settle into a style, then I know the band would instantly fall apart because none of us like the same music. We would never agree on what style to relax and copy and do our weekend like lawyer band or whatever. The blues covers or something. We would never agree on what the cover song should be.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I was asking, because I mean, like for an aspiring artist now, on the one hand, it seems like outmaneuver is a necessity as far as like cultivating your own sound that's truly self-defined. But on the other hand, like you said, it's exhausting. Being the mouse, running away from the cat.
Well, and there's that sense that finding your own sound can be defined two ways. One is find your sound and stick to it. The other is find your sound, and as soon as it becomes successful, that means the gun's pointed at you. You better get out of the way, or you're finished. Like you. I often think of it as a something that means a lot to me as a concept is the sweet spot, or the word enough. There's actually, it's so funny because we're going to go there tonight. I'm in Berkeley right now at my friend's house, and we've already decided where we're going for dinner. And this place is it's like a legend in my mind. There's an ironic end to the story, but there's a place in Berkeley called Chaya. It's a Japanese vegan restaurant. And every single time when I used to live in the Bay Area and we would come over to Chaya, there was just a line around the block. The place was tiny, They could never even come close to meeting their demand. People love this restaurant. And you just go up to the chef and you're kind of like, you guys want to expand? They're like, don't you want another branch? And like year after year after year, no, we like it the way it is. Mom and pop, it's just a small business. They're doing fine. They don't need any more. Infinite growth is not their model. Being happy on this earth and surviving is their model, and making healthy food for the people in their community, that's their model. Of course, the end of the story is there's another branch on Valencia Street in San Francisco now, but that came after I moved away. But in any case, still, the idea of enough. The idea
still two branches, yeah.
Yeah, it's limited. The idea of the sweet spot is you aren't so obscure that your music is simply not heard by anyone, which is just a little, can get depressing when that happens. We've all been there at various points. And then you're also not so high on the main radar that you become a target of whether it's AI copying you, whether it's American Airlines using you as the walkout music, or whether it's, music journalism that loves a rise and fall story and wants to make you the butt of their joke and a reason that they get more clicks. There's something so great about this like hidden, teeny tiny, narrow little band in there where you can survive, and anything more, you're done for. Anything less, you are not eating,
Right. I mean, that reminds me of Mood Machine. It's like, why be on the one size? Like, why strive for this one size fit all? Why are you trying to compete with Lady Gaga in your project? Like enough can be finding your own sound. It's better to have 1,000 hardcore listeners than 100,000 passive listeners.
I'm telling you. I'm here to tell you.
Love it. No, it's inspiring. Enough. I love it.
Yeah.
Enough. One thing from our conversation at 2220 Arts that we talked about that I thought if we had enough time, we kind of touched on it, but if there's anything else you had to say, we could weave it in. It's just at that talk, we talked about, you brought up the idea of the commons in a way that stuck with me. And I feel like we kind of throughout the conversation sort of like alluded to, the enclosure of the commons. But something that I think about all the time is like, what would it actually look like to like protect the musical commons? Is it possible? Is it something we can even imagine anymore? I was wondering, like, do you think about this?
Well, the first thought I do, and I'm glad that you do too. The first question is it the premise? There are many whose interest would be served to say that music does not represent a commons. In other words, it's another way of saying music is not a human need, or it's not a basic human trait. It's a luxury, and it's a commodity, and it's an inert thingamabob that you buy and sell and trade and whatever, and that has nothing to do with the commons. And that would not be an atypical view among a capitalist. Of course, you have all the rest of human history and human society to contend with, would tend to, going back to pre-human species, we were talking about ants earlier. Let's just talk about birds. Come on. Obviously, song is a thing, that was not invented by Adam Smith, it was not invented by the Medici family or whatever, it's not a capitalist invention. They did not invent music. It is an innate instinct that it's even after centuries of thinking about it and talking about it, researching, writing, and doing it, we're still not really sure why it is we do it. You can say, oh, it's all just mating. Well, it's not all mating. It is mating. But it's like, no, it's expression. Well, yeah, but it's also helps you think, and it helps you process emotions, and it helps you be by yourself, and it helps express yourself to the person next to you. And it's a way for everyone to dance and get some exercise. And it's a way to make things and feel creative. And it's a way to get everybody in sync. And it's a way to manipulate emotions. And, it's infinite. I think it's a basic human need to make it and to hear it. And then you get into, if it is a basic human need, does that mean everyone has a right to it? And it's funny because the capitalists would have said no until the capitalists discovered streaming, until basically the capitalists got really mad at Napster and then invented their version of Napster, which isn't free file sharing and stealing, but is something where they can profit off of it. And then all of a sudden, whole different ballgame. It's like, then it's all about, and I mean, you can point to it. It's like 2003 or something. I mean, whenever that moment was, it's like from then on, it was the exact opposite propaganda. It was, yes, child, you deserve free music. You should get free music. Everything, you know, life is about having free music. And then every child grows up thinking of free music once again as a basic human right. Whereas the previous generations, for century, whatever, of recorded music, did not believe that. They believed they had to pay for it. Now everybody thinks it should be free. And so you say, okay, I'm, as much as I kind of sympathize with the Lars Ulrich model of like, maybe that's not fair, I'm actually willing to concede. Like there's kind of a there's kind of an anthropological rationale that says maybe we do get free music. Maybe music should be free. But if that's the case, then it should be whatever is the people should be providing it to each other and not three billionaires, sit there in their corporate HQ with their new furniture that they just paid $1 million for, somewhere in Sweden or whatever, and just like the checks are just rolling in while they like laugh all the way to the bank, and like the musician gets nothing. I mean, there's no way that that's fair, obviously. So yeah, I just like, if we're going to have nation states, I would love to see a nationalized, music library, basically the exact same thing as Spotify or YouTube, but it's just, there's no profiteering. And it doesn't just all go to one billionaire who then shunts it off to, some defense company like Daniel Ek does, or if you're the person who owns Google and YouTube or whatever, you just send all your money to Donald Trump, and get him elected and be a Nazi. It's like, yeah, how about just, yeah, you get free music. And if we don't have nation states, hey, thumbs up, even better. I'm against them, they're stupid. They're another recent invention and an aberration in human history. So let's get rid of those, and let's just, I mean, it's a hard question. Because it's a hard question for me because I am personally implicated. I make recorded music. I make a living off of selling. And I'm one of those people coming up to Liz Pelly and saying, I'm sorry, I put my music on Spotify and now I can pay my rent, or at least it's chipping into my rent, and I do other things. I go on tour, whatever. I sell physical copies. It sort of begs the question, is recorded music itself an aberration, And you can get pretty philosophical about it. And it's like, there's nothing inherently wrong with a recording. I'm not one of these sort of back to nature, kind of like eco-fascists or whatever, like we should go back in time. To then you'd be like, well, what era? It's like, well, no, I don't really want to live, in monarchical times. I don't want to live in the Industrial Revolution. I don't want to be a serf in feudal times, which is kind of what we are now. Where's the ideal? No, it's not that. Make America great again. I'm not that. I'm not about wanting to find the ideal moment in the past to which we should now return. But it's more like, it sort of brings up the question, what really is the role of recorded music? And there's nothing wrong inherently with a recording, but I do think that it has been twisted. I think it's been co-opted. I think its meaning has been distorted and turned into a tool of profiteering for a tiny handful of people. who are trying to destroy the world actively. And I think it's been turned into a tool of indoctrination, practice at self-promotion and capitalism and competition. Basically, Daniel Ek has just sat there and decided. He kind of rewrote the dictionary. He went to Webster's and just said, you know what? You know that part in there where it says the word music? Just scratch that out. I'm making it something else now. Music isn't whatever you thought it was for the past 200,000 years. It's short songs that show up on playlists if you are willing to take a pay cut, or if it's mega popular and gets a lot of clicks, and doesn't have anything that offends me, Daniel Ek. That's the new definition of music. It's just a recording, has a short lifespan, and it tries to go viral, and then that's it. Poof. That's what music is now. And so to try and indoctrinate people that music is it's a competition. For who can, I don't know, just attract more attention. Really, I mean, with the digital platforms, whether it's Spotify or something like a social media, people are just competing for attention, obviously on screens or through speakers, and it pits one musician against the other inherently, and there's no evidence that that pre-capitalist societies defined music as the dog eat dog, to the death competition between people who like to sing to see who can destroy the other one, and make the other one not heard by monopolizing as much space for yourself as possible. I don't know. That's my take on it. I think that the commons is a really nice idea, in fact, and it's hard to know how that would become a real thing. But I take some small inspiration from the public library in a way that's kind of it's one model that kind of is a shadow of the idea of a commons, that people can share, and it's like basically free, and you can just go borrow stuff and it's cool. I like the idea.
It's like the antithesis of content, which might be the
Right.
word that you might be,
Right.
what is it becoming now? Music is just the auditory arm of content on the internet, and things like, if the commons, like Liz was saying, like they're saying that it's open to fair use for data
Right.
scraping on the
Right.
internet, then like we need a new definition of it that is like inherently the antithesis of content, and in the very least, like, verbally, acknowledging and protective of these extractive practices in a way that, the library model, in some ways, it feels, at least as far as literature goes,
Right.
like the antithesis of content, the antithesis of words on the internet is like words in the library.
Yeah, I think it's complicated because the to call it content, I mean, everybody bristles at the word content, particularly musicians, and rightly so. But it's content for what, I think, is where you really start to realize the way that you're being used and that you're just a tool. It's content for surveillance. It's content for data extraction. In other words, it's like what they call the loss leader. It's like you go to the corner store and there's this one thing they sell really cheap. They sell it for a loss, so to get people in the store, and then while they're there, they buy other stuff. Music, the entire art form, is now just a loss leader for Daniel Ek's advertising company. That's all it is. Literally, that's all it is. And I feel an energy among a lot of young people right now that excites me. That's kind of a hardcore energy that seems to want to make the spicy and the bitter, the quote unquote unpalatable, the thing that can't be used for the airplane, the deplaning, the thing that doesn't sound very good in a hamburger commercial, the thing that isn't really fitting too easily into a chill playlist. And to do that, partly to not succeed under the definition that Daniel Ek has so generously provided for the entire human species of what music now is, and to refuse it, you know.
Mhm.
I love it. We should
Love
all
it.
be failing. Let's fucking
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's
Noble and
also
godlike in ruin, you know. That's the vibe.
Thank you for tuning in to the Critical Listening Podcast. Our show is created and written by Liz Pelly and myself, Max Alper, and is produced by Matt Carlin. You can support the show by signing up for the Patreon at patreon.com/critical listening. And our theme song is the track Talk to Me by the group Eraser.
I am